Listen, there comes a moment in every man's life when noise stops mattering, when arguments stop meaning anything, when explanations feel pointless, and all that's left is silence. Not the weak kind, not the scared kind. I'm talking about the silence that only a man who is finally awakened can care. The silence that comes after you've been lied to, manipulated, used, misunderstood, and instead of breaking, you build. You know exactly what I mean, because you've been there. They pushed you, tested you, drained you, and then waited for your reaction. They expected you to yell, to chase, to bleed in front of them so they could feel important again. But you didn't. You went quiet, and that silence became your sharpest weapon. The moment everything changed, you didn't snap. You didn't explode. You just stopped giving them access. And that's the part that haunts them. Because some people can only survive when they're feeding off your emotions, your reactions, your energy. They feel powerful when you're restless. They feel important when you're hurt. They feel superior when you keep trying. But when you stop trying, when you stop responding, when you stop caring, their world collapses. Because deep down, they always knew you were the anchor. You were the strength. You were the loyalty. You were the stability. And the day you walked away silently, they realized what they had lost. Not a man, but a source of power. They didn't expect you to rise like this. They thought your silence meant defeat. But you weren't defeated. You were transforming. While they were busy pretending, performing, talking about you, you were rebuilding. Quietly, privately, powerfully. You were learning to control your emotions. You were learning to listen to your intuition. You were learning to master your boundaries, not because you needed revenge, but because you needed peace. And peace, my friend, is the most terrifying thing you can ever achieve, especially to the people who tried to break you. They expected anger. They expected chaos. They expected you to fight, to beg, to argue. But instead, you became calm. And nothing unsettles a guilty person more than the calm of the man they tried to destroy. Silence is not weakness. It's your evolution. You see, silence is misunderstood. People think silence is running away. People think silence is surrender. But silence is discipline. It's emotional mastery. It's masculine self-control in its purest form. Because anyone can scream. Anyone can slam doors. Anyone can say, "I'm done." But only the strong can stay gone. Only the healed can walk away without looking back. Only a man who finally values himself can choose peace over attention. Silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of absolute truth. And your truth is simple. You don't owe explanations to people who already decided to misunderstand you. You don't owe closure to people who disrespected your heart. You don't owe loyalty to people who fed on your kindness and blamed you for bleeding. Your silence is you saying, "I'm done wasting my soul on the unworthy." They wanted you to break. Let me tell you something they will never admit. They expected your world to collapse without them. They wanted you to feel lost, guilty, desperate, alone. They wanted your nights to feel empty and your days to feel heavy, because chaos was their playground and drama was their oxygen. But what they never understood is that a man grows the most during the quietest seasons of his life. While they waited for you to fall apart, you were waking up. You were discovering your worth. You were rebuilding your confidence. You were sharpening your discipline. You were becoming someone they never believed you could be. You weren't breaking. You were ascending. The stillness that haunts them. Your silence did something they didn't expect. It became a mirror. And for the first time, they saw themselves clearly. The manipulation, the selfishness, the betrayal, the disrespect. Because when you stop reacting, people are forced to face the truth of who they are without your emotional energy holding them together. Your silence showed them they weren't the hero. They weren't the victim. They were the problem. And now, every quiet night, every unanswered message, every empty notification burns them from the inside out. They don't miss you because you're gone. They miss you because they finally understand you were the only person who ever cared without conditions. And they ruined it. Wire silence is their revenge. Revenge isn't always loud. It isn't fire. It isn't rage. Sometimes revenge is simply moving on, healing, growing, glowing without them. They expected you to collapse without their presence. Instead, you thrived without their chaos. And that will always hit harder than any argument, any insult, any confrontation. Because nothing punishes a guilty heart more than watching the man they took for granted rise into someone they can no longer reach. Your silence became the boundary they can't cross, the lesson they can't ignore, the ending they didn't choose, but deserved. The new version of you. You've grown into a man who doesn't need validation, a man who doesn't beg, a man who doesn't chase, a man who doesn't explain. You choose peace. You choose discipline. You choose self-respect. You've learned that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every person deserves access to your heart. You've learned that solitude is strength. You've learned that silence is clarity. You've learned that distance is protection. And the people who once thought they owned you now realize they never understood you because you were not fragile. You were merciful. And the moment you withdrew that mercy, their world went cold. Now they feel the consequences. They scroll through your life silently now, watching you smile, grow, succeed. Watching you live with the calmness they can't imitate. Watching you rise with the strength they never respected. And every moment of your peace punishes them, not because you intended to hurt them, but because guilt is the heaviest weight a person can carry. They're haunted by the same question every night. How did he walk away so completely? And the truth is, you didn't stop caring. You stopped wasting care. You stopped feeding their ego. You stopped tolerating their disrespect. You didn't ghost them. You outgrew them. The final chapter they won't accept. They keep telling people they don't care. They keep pretending they feel nothing. But their voice trembles every time your name is mentioned. Because indifference doesn't shake like that. A confidence doesn't break like that. Strength doesn't regret like that. They thought time would make you come back. But time only made you stronger, quieter, calmer, wiser. You didn't lose the argument. They lost access. The truth you carry now. Listen carefully. You didn't choose silence to punish them. You chose silence to protect yourself. But your silence still punished them, because it revealed everything they tried to hide. Silence outlasts. Silence exposes. Silence heals. Silence transforms. Silence is the final form of power. And now they know you weren't the weak one. You weren't the emotional one. You weren't the foolish one. You were the only honest one. And they lost you, not because you slammed the door, but because you grew too big to fit back into the place where they left you hurting. The man you are now, you're not the same man they broke. You're the man who rose from that breaking. You're the man who learned self-respect the hard way. You're the man who found peace in places they never looked. You're the man who discovered strength in silence. They call it ghosting. You call it growth. They call it distance. You call it boundaries. They call it revenge. You call it freedom. And now, my friend, there's no going back. Because once a man learns the power of silence, he becomes unstoppable.